Everyone in the world makes choices about what they value every day of their lives. A lot of the time we're consciously thinking about it, such as in an overpriced restaurant deciding on whether a glass of wine is really worth the cost. And sometimes we're less aware of it, perhaps in a supermarket buying the same bag of crisps you buy every week. Most of the time, at least in my experience, when people discuss the value of something, they are often referring to the currency required to either create or purchase something, its cost, or the amount of currency that someone possesses, their monetary wealth. But is this really the value of those things? Let's say someone asks you to describe what something is worth without using currency. If pounds and pence, dollars and cents, and every other denomination were unavailable to you, how would you explain it without even the concept of a currency to measure it by? You might attempt to explain it by using a multiple of some other product, 400 pencils or 16 car tires. But that's not really answering the question. You are simply using something else as a currency. You are saying that those things are equivalent in value to you, but you haven't described what the value actually is. This is because it's actually a very difficult thing for most people to do. The true value of something is an entirely personal opinion that is constantly changing, and you make decisions based on that changing opinion every day. Your opinion of the value of something relies on how useful you perceive that thing to be, how effectively you believe it will fulfill a need or desire you hold, and therefore how likely you are to achieve the outcome you want from it. When it comes to the things you already have, you're valuing them by the needs or desires they currently fulfill for you, or will fulfill in the future. These needs and desires are what determines the cost of something, the things you will lose by no longer having it. Let's go back to my earlier example, where you're in a restaurant and you're looking at a wine list. You see that one looks like it might be nice, and now you have to decide what the value of that wine is. Then you look to your wallet and you take whatever currency you need to trade for that wine, and you decide on the value of that too. If you decide that the value of the wine is greater than the value of the money, you buy the drink. If you decide it is not, you'll look further down the list. Now, of course, you might say that you're only in the restaurant because you're on a date, and you're trying to look like you've got more money than you do. In that case, the wine alone certainly isn't valued higher than the money. The difference, however, is that you aren't just comparing the value of the money to the value of the wine. You're comparing the value of the money to the value of the wine plus the value of coming across a certain way to a certain person. This also applies to all interactions between people. Everything you do is a value decision. One of the best examples of this is in the Friends episode, the one where Phoebe hates PBS, where Phoebe tries to prove that it is possible to perform an entirely selfless good deed. She fails in her efforts since she always valued the outcome of the good deed more than the effort required to perform it, whether that was the thanks she got for doing it, the satisfaction from winning the bet, or even just the positive feeling she got for having helped someone. Have you ever donated to charity before? Why did you do so? And have you ever given money to a charity that you didn't remotely care about or have anyone pressuring you to do so? Perhaps you wanted the calendar with the dogs on it, or perhaps you felt bad seeing an advert on TV and you wanted to give money to feel like you're helping a cause. Or perhaps you're one of those people who just want to be able to tell your friends that you're charitable so that you can act smug about it. You know who you are. In all of those decisions, you're valuing the personal outcome. If you don't have any personal, social, or material benefit, you wouldn't donate. This sounds like a criticism of people who donate to charity, but it isn't meant to be. The reason people feel bad when they see those adverts is because humans are capable of empathy. We are meant to want to help each other, and we're meant to feel better once we do, because if we didn't feel better whenever problems were resolved, life would be perpetual misery. And for those people who give money to feel smug about it, or to try and advertise their business, that's good too. It still supports the charity, and even if smug people are irritating to you, the ability to feel smug is certainly good to them. The charity wants and values the money much more than they value people not being smug or advertising their donations. And the smug people and their advertisers value being smug and advertising more than their money, and as a result, both of them gain value from the donation. They both gain a profit. Profit is often now seen as a negative word, as if it is something that someone gets that they do not deserve or something that they take at someone else's expense. In many cases, this could be considered true. If I threaten you with a gun, I make you value your life more than your wallet, so that you give me the wallet where you would not otherwise. I profit off the wallet at your expense. In that example, it would be a coercive transaction, one in which an outside influence was intervening in your life negatively and forcing you to make a decision you wouldn't otherwise make. This is usually the result of the fact that you cannot resist them getting their valued outcome. If I'm threatening you with a gun for your wallet, the assumption is that I can kill you and take the wallet, or you can give me the wallet. In both outcomes, I get the wallet anyway, so you might as well hand it over and live. In voluntary transactions, however, both people control whether or not the other gets the outcome they want. If instead of pointing a gun at you, I offer you some ice cream on a hot day, in exchange for some of the money you have in that wallet, I'm saying to you that I value your money more than this ice cream, and if you value that refreshing ice cream on this hot day more than that money, we can both make an exchange and both of us will gain value, and as such, we both profit. You might say that, actually, since you eat the ice cream, even if you did value it more than the money, you lose out because you consumed it. And this is true, you have lost the ice cream you traded your money for. Or at the very least, you'll lose the ice cream in the next 24 to 48 hours. What you've done is make a second value decision. You have decided the value of having the ice cream in your hand is lower to you than the value of the sensation, nutrition, energy, flavor, or any other aspect of eating the ice cream. You of course know why you value the ice cream, but why does the person who sold it value the money? It's simply because they believe they will be able to use that money later to acquire something else they will also consume, even if they're going through many more exchanges before they get to that point. Even if they don't spend it immediately and hold on to the money, they do so only because they assume that they can one day exchange it for some product or service to consume. If you then look at a market as people voluntarily trading value, currency is actually just a product like any other. Money, pencils, steak, gold, fish, anything. They're all products that you value more or less at any given time. The value of money is simply your confidence that other people will want it more than you do later on, and that you'll therefore be able to make a profit from it, whether that's more money, more food, a nice house, or good feelings from donating it. This highlights another question. Why do you use the money you're using now? Most, if not all, modern currencies are fiat currency, which is simply printed paper and coins, or even just lights on a monitor, that are backed by a government and declared to be the currency to use. It serves no alternative function, and it is not scarce, as its production and supply is controlled by whichever government backs it. It is actually not technically money at all as a result of this. The purpose and value in a currency should be fairly obvious. It solves what is known as a coincidence of wants. If, as an example, you produce apples and you want to trade for firewood. Unfortunately, the woodcutter doesn't like apples, but does like oranges. So you then have to go to the orange farmer, and if they also don't like apples, you have to find out what they want and continue doing this until you find someone who wants apples. You then have to go back to everyone one by one and make each exchange until you finally get your firewood. A currency allows you to trade your apples with someone who desires apples, and then trade that currency with the woodcutter for a relative amount of firewood, without having to maintain stocks of oranges. Much of the value of the currency comes from the convenience and the time saved having to deal with large chains of people, and your belief that this will remain true. If someone doesn't want the currency that you have after all, you then must find someone who has a currency they do want and trade for that first, and therefore the less valuable your currency is to you. Cryptocurrencies most often have a fixed supply, making them scarce, and many, especially the more modern ones, also serve a software function of some kind or another, and as long as someone has need for that software function, you can be confident that they will continue to value that currency. The same is said of precious metals. There is only so much to dig out of the ground, and they all serve purposes, both visually and in their physical properties. People will always need gold to make things, and so people will always value gold. But why would you value the fiat currency in your wallet? If all of it ceased to exist tomorrow morning, would there be anything that nobody could do anymore? If nobody would accept it in a supermarket, would you even still want it? You could work your whole life to save a large volume of it, and then in one day's worth of printing, its supply could be increased and suddenly people don't want it quite as much as they did before, and so you have to spend more of it on the same things, and suddenly, it doesn't hold as much value to you anymore either. The reason you use fiat currency over any other is simply because it is a monopoly in your location, and you're forced to pay any taxation with it. If you don't like the bread from one brand you've been getting because they've been using dodgy ingredients, you can get a different one next time from someone else. However, if your government prints more of the currency you're using, you have no practical alternative unless you wish to risk being accused of money laundering and having it all confiscated anyway. This is much like the coercive decisions mentioned earlier, in which your options are to use the local fiat currency, or to try not to use it until you really need to buy food, and then use it anyway because growing enough food to live on your own is a big lifestyle change for most people. Far more coercive, though, is the demand by government of taxation in the specific currency. Your options are to use the currency and pay them, or they will arrest you, lock you away, and convert whatever you do have to their currency and end up with it anyway. This, of course, is the same with any monopoly where you are limited to a single provider, who can effectively decide to do whatever they like, since you lack an alternative and therefore they are guaranteed your custom, even if they spit in your face every time you walk in. So when you consider you're using a currency simply because it's your only option, it's easy to see then how the amount that you'd spend on something, the way you measured its value, ends up being synonymous with its total cost in currency, because you have to use that intermediary government-backed currency for all of your exchanges. It's also easy to see how people misinterpret this to also mean that since currency itself is value to them, when they trade currency away for something else, they consider only the person they gave the currency to as the one who profited. This is often mislabeled as a fault of the person trading the product for currency, especially when they spent less of the same currency on producing the product. They will also be blamed by many when, inevitably, the supply of the currency is increased, the price they ask for the product increases with it. The issue, of course, is that if you have £50,000 and then the supply of pounds is increased, while you still have £50,000, since there's now more of it, it's easier to get, and people don't value it quite as much, and require more of your £50,000 for products and services, and as a result, you will value it less as well, and become poorer as a result of that, the profit going to whoever printed the new notes. Let's say, for example, we were back at the original pressing of the first £1 coin. If you have the very first £1 coin, the most that anything could ever cost you, in pounds sterling, is £1, since there is no possibility of spending more than that £1. It is 100% of the total value of pounds. The second coin is then minted, and now the maximum cost of anything is £2. Anything that costs £1, 100% of the total value, will now cost £2 since that is now 100% of the total value. You don't have that second coin though, so the value of yours has been halved, and the value you once had is now in the other coin. You are left with only 50% of the total value. People who own virtually any other products that are not that currency didn't lose out as a result of the supply being increased, and so they simply ask for more of that currency when you trade it. They do just fine. The government printing the new currency has more of it relative to the supply, so they gain from it. You are left holding the bag, as they say. Unfortunately, there are many examples of coercive decisions that people are forced to make, whether it is taxation, as mentioned earlier, where you pay or you get arrested and then you pay, or perhaps the minimum wage, where if nobody values your time more than the set wage, you either do not work, or you work for less than the minimum wage, your employer is shut down by the government, and you end up without a job anyway. They also give you no choice in losing the value they take from your money whenever they print more of it, forcing you to take financial risks you wouldn't normally take, simply to try and avoid losing quite as much value from inflation, since the longer you save it, the further it loses its value. Your choice, or the lack of a choice in currency, is the same as any other coercive decision, and will remain that way for as long as the government enforces its version of fiat as the legal tender in your area. Therefore, it's important to distinguish currency from value, and instead place it as a product like any other, because in voluntary transactions, with or without currency, value is still exchanged, and both parties still make a profit in value from that exchange, from the needs and desires that are fulfilled by it, even if it's as simple as having a conversation and deciding you value engaging in a discussion more than whatever else you will do with that time. This also means that everyone has the means to profit in a voluntary market. Even if you have nothing else, you have time, and there will be people who value your time enough to offer you something for it, and if you value what they offer, you can start making a profit yourself.